When it comes to drug use, addiction does not discriminate, but the factors leading to it can. And new research shows deadly drug overdoses are rising fastest among Black Americans, and the pandemic made it worse. To find out the impact in our own community, we followed two leaders in our area on the front lines of fighting fentanyl.
The leading scientists in the world on this issue have tied a direct line from systemic racism to fentanyl in the Black community.
I started out first drinking and then marijuana, and then by 11 I was sniffing heroin.
Fentanyl isn't the first opioid crisis to hit the Black community.
I tend to more or less for a false sense of enjoyment, a false sense of fulfillment, to kind of like be able to deal with my feelings of worthlessness inside.
USF researcher DoctorMicahJohnson studies drug misuse. He says the heroin epidemic of the 70s and 80s should be a lesson for today.
The face of the opioid crisis at that time was poor Black people. Therefore, it was met with a lot of insensitivity, no resources, no humanization, and locking people up and treating them like animals.
A disparity Johnson hopes to better address this time around.
Well, we're heading down to one of the best facilities in our college. Over 2,000 square feet research laboratory, the largest cluster of African-American researchers in the country, probably. Gifted through a $1.5 million grant from NIH.
In this new space,
how do the drugs get into these communities?
USF researchers will study the impact fentanyl and other drug use is having on minority communities.
We don't quite understand the impact it's having because we haven't been able to do the research fast enough to keep up with the epidemic.
Neither has the state. The Florida Department of Health tracks a lot of drug data, but we couldn't find any racial breakdowns for fentanyl.
Throughout the history of time, drugs have been considered medicines, right? So why are people overindulging in certain substances and certain medicines? One paradigm is it's to cope.
Dr. Johnson says fentanyl is especially harmful in low-income Black communities that formed as the result of racial segregation. He says the street supply is getting more dangerous.
The fentanyl is so powerful that it's used to cut and mix with other drugs to maintain a certain potency.
Johnson says the drugs are some people's way of dealing with life's pressures when they don't have the tools or resources to cope.
Folks who are hopeless are 4 to 8 times more likely to misuse opioids. I've heard folks mention the widespread availability of drugs, but the lack of healthcare services, not just therapy, but any sort of healthcare services in their communities, and that's a huge problem. Systemic racism is a critical issue, a critical barrier by which people feel stress, and also that blocks people from access.
So to find a solution,
we have to address the social stressors that are causing people to need to cope. That thing called hope.
You, the creator of everything,
is so important.
offer hope.
For those who feel hopeless, they turn to these drugs to escape that hopelessness.
the people you saw in this piece, they're working to make sure that people can have that hope. And that research center at USF, Dr. Johnson says it is one of, if not the largest in the nation, studying addiction when it comes to drug use in communities of color.
Who are we? We're good people doing good work. Scan the QR code, donate to the Smart Lab. Scan that QR code, donate to the Smart Lab. We need water. We ain't got no water, bruh.